Live from the Ken and Valerie Baker studio at WHYY, this is Studio 2.
On Wednesday, June 10th, welcome, friends, on into the program. I'm Cherry Gregg.
And I'm Avi Wolfman-Arent.
Comedian Gilbert Gottfried once said, "It's the duty of a comedian to find where the line is drawn and intentionally cross it."
You didn't do it in his voice, though, which would have been really funny.
I didn't want to do that, take the risk. But to me, what happens when crossing the line doesn't provoke thought or laughter, just pain, outrage, and division? A recent Netflix roast honoring Philadelphia's own Kevin Hart has become a cultural flashpoint. And over the past few weeks, my social media timeline has been riddled with hot takes and debate on the jokes from that show. You know, the ones about George Floyd, lynching, suicide, Charlie Kirk, and about race. Some defended the comics. They argued that nothing should be off limits in comedy. Others asked whether context matters, whether who's telling the joke, who's writing it, and who's in the room changes everything. At the same time, there's all sorts of questions about speech itself that are growing louder and louder. And I've been fascinated with this issue. And to me, the question is whether comedy is a canary in the coal mine. So today we're asking, what do our comedy controversies reveal about who we have become as a culture? We've got two really smart guests, including one you may have heard of, Kamau Bell. We also have a free speech advocate from Pryor on the show as well. And we want to hear from you. Has the line changed for socially acceptable speech and comedy? What is your take? And to you, it's when it comes to jokes. You can give us a call. The number is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can put your comments in the chat. And I would really love to hear your takes, because sometimes you laugh, Avi, you know, unintentionally. It's involuntary.
It's a reflex.
Sometimes.
It's a reflex.
If you laughed at something that was crazy offensive and you kind of like, oh, why did I laugh at that? But it was funny, you know. Do you feel like there should be a line? It's squishy.
It's the duty of a comedian to...
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
Couldn't wait to do his Gilbert voice. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I did like his performance as the parrot in Aladdin, by the way.
Very
Gilbert Gottfried, very talented guy. Before we jump into our trio of local news stories, heads up, it's another giveaway Wednesday. Every Wednesday this summer, we're giving out 2 pairs of tickets to an upcoming event in the region. Don't worry, it's not a comedy festival.
Nope.
Stick around until the end of the show for the reveal of this week's giveaway Wednesday event. This is a really, really good one. And you have to stick around for your chance to win. So just listen for that later in the show. Now let's get into our trio of local news stories.
And you're first up here.
I'm first up. So what should have been a fairly routine vote in Northwest Philadelphia Monday night has turned into a local scandal that pits centrist Democrats versus progressives, machine politics versus upstarts. So this was a vote among Democrats in the 22nd ward of Philadelphia, Mount Airy. They were picking their ward leader. Now, the incumbent ward leader is Cindy Bass, who also, by the way, is on city council representing this part of the city. So Bass had a progressive challenger in this minor election named Octavius Price. At the vote, which is in person, Bass called for a voice vote, and you can hear on a video taken at the event about half the room seems to vote for Bass, about half for Price. Here's what it sounded like.
All in favor of Octavius Price, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All in favor of Cindy Bass, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
In the call of the chair, the ayes have it for Cindy Bass. The election is called.
All right, so Peter's out from there. But so Bass is the chair. She's the one that calls the election for herself.
Seems a little
when
biased.
everyone else in the room is saying, why don't you actually do a roll call vote, which means actually count the tally and the votes. She just declared herself the winner. Now, Bass defended herself to the Inquirer. She said, quote, "We had the votes. No matter what I did, some of these people are not going to be happy. It's okay. That's democracy." Her opponents say that is definitely not democracy. They plan to challenge the results, which is their right, and perhaps there will be a definitive vote at some point down the line. But the big picture here is that a lot of people feel like this is an example of machine politics using underhanded tactics to hold on to power.
Yeah, all eyes are on party power, and a growing group of voters, especially in that district of Mount Airy, they are not happy with the party. And I have to say, I had the pleasure of moderating the 8th councilmanic district race in 2023 in Mount Airy. And I can tell you, the debate, it was standing room only and it was contentious. That progressive section of the 8th district is very upset with Councilwoman Cindy Bass, and they made it known, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to sort of undermine or unseat her. And she came very close to losing her seat in the last race. And, you know, part of their challenge is this leadership, this ward leadership, because ward leaders have a lot of power. The promotions.
So if they could unseat her as ward leader, it might lead to her being unseated as a city council member.
Because of how things work on election day. So, but she's fighting them tooth and nail. And in this case, I think, refusing to take that vote and then call it democracy is probably dividing her district even more.
Story number 2 happens to be around transparency. What are the odds? Go ahead, Sherry.
Yes, New Jersey political rankling. Well, it's slowing down a bill that would force beach towns to disclose what they're doing with all the money from beach badges. Now, if you are not a Jersey Shore goer, a beach badge is a thing people pay for in order to access the beach in a number of Jersey Shore towns. Badge prices can range from $11 a day to $71 for the season on the low end to as high as $200 in some towns for the entire season. And as the prices started getting higher, people started asking questions about where the money is going. Well, under state law, a town can charge beachgoers for beach access, but they can only use the money on beach-related expenses like lifeguard salaries, summer policing, and the list goes on. And that's where this bill came in. Last year, lawmakers introduced a proposal that would require the towns to be transparent and disclose how much they earn from these badges and how much they spend. They'd have to say how much it costs to run the beach. But now lawmakers are getting a lot of pushback on that. They're having to now revamp that bill. Some shore towns say, hey, there's already transparency. All you got to do is look at the town budgets, look at the beach utility budgets. Why do they need to do more? And so now that bill is in limbo. But Avi, I want to give you an idea of how much money is made in New Jersey on the beach badges.
Sure.
According to NJ.com, statewide, New Jersey Shore beach towns made about $52 million on the badges in 2024, with Ocean City raking in the highest revenue at $6 million a year.
I can't tell if that's a lot anymore. I hear these numbers all the time with budgets, 52 million, 6 million. Either way, this is way outside of my bailiwick. I'm not really a shore person.
I'm not either.
And partly because you need to have a beach badge and I find that annoying. But
me too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know why this needs to be a state law. It seems like if you were curious about how your town was spending the money, you could deal with that at a local level. But again, I don't know.
People feel like it's not clear. You got to dig too hard. They're like, you should just tell us, but this is Jersey.
You could vote for a local law to do that. I don't know.
Me and Jersey rules on the beach. That's why I go to Rehoboth. But go ahead. Sorry.
Shots
I know
fired.
My Jersey people going to be mad, but.
Shots fired.
No, okay.
New Jersey. It's a beautiful state. We love it. I
love the Garden State.
We love it. All right. Story number 3. The robot takeover of Philadelphia has reached stage 3, folks. We've already got Waymos doing test trips on the roadways. We've got Uber Eats bots cruising on sidewalks. Up next, folks, delivery drones in the sky. Wow. Yesterday, Walmart announced plans to expand drone delivery service to the Philadelphia region. We will be the first city/region in the northeastern part of the country to get these delivery drones. The Philadelphia Business Journal says the expansion will happen next year, 2027. These Walmart drones are made by a company called Wing, which is owned by Google's parent company. The drones fly up to 60 miles per hour, according to the company. Pretty fast. Yeah.
I know.
They fly a few hundred feet above the ground. And I saw a video of them, and basically how they work is there's like a big cord with a hook, and it lowers down your package from the drone and places it on your driveway or stoop or whatever. So apparently they're going to start piloting these next year here in Philadelphia. So you will maybe see Walmart drones zipping across the sky next to Independence Hall or something. I don't know exactly where they're going to be, but it seems nuts. It's hard to imagine.
I mean, it is hard. And in the notes, it says that, the average drone delivery will be completed in 23 minutes. That is very impressive. I love my deliveries fast, but this is kind of scary, and I still don't trust Philly. I know I've been saying this. I remember what happened to Hitchbot. People have been beating up
These
those
are in the sky,
Uber
Sherry.
Eats bots. People got BB guns. People ready, man. They ready. And it is a little nerve-wracking
If they
to see
haven't
packages just dropping from the sky.
If they haven't wiped out these turtle paste Uber Eats bots that are on the
been
ground,
beating
they're
them
not
up
going to do
and
anything to
vandalizing
the drones in the sky.
I don't know, man.
But I will say, something about having these things in the sky that does slightly unnerve me.
And it does make me wonder, they're going to,
Feels more dystopian.
Yeah, and they're just going to be packages on little strings coming down.
Sounds like good fodder for a stand-up bit.
Ooh, that's what we're talking about. We'll be right back after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Studio 2 here on WHYY. I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman-Eric. Comedy is inherently provocative. It's always spurred audiences to grapple with challenging ideas. But where is the line between exploring tension and taboo in society and bad faith jokes that go beyond the pale?
Yeah, this conversation was amped up recently after the Netflix roast of Philadelphia native Kevin Hart. Shane Gillis hosted the event and warned people that there'd be racist, terrible things said. Here was Tony Hinchcliffe later delivering on that promise.
You've done good, though, Kevin. The black community is so proud of you. Right now, George Floyd is looking up at us all, laughing so hard that he can't breathe.
After that, Pete Davidson made a joke about Charlie Kirk being shot in the throat and equated it to a sex act. All of which begs the question, what is off limits in comedy in 2026? And has the line shifted more broadly for socially acceptable speech? Or, as comedian Cheryl Underwood, who withstood jokes about her husband's suicide at this roast, put it, Do controversial jokes merely indicate that freedom of speech is alive today?
To talk about comedy, controversy, language, and the politics of a joke, we're joined by two really great guests. We have Kamau Bell, a stand-up comedian and creative force behind We Need to Talk About Cosby and United Shades of America. He's also the host of a new video podcast on the latest in politics and culture. It's called Who's With Me? Kamau, welcome to Studio 2.
Thanks for having me. You really did all my Philadelphia connections. I also went to Penn for a year and a half.
That's right.
Put it in there. Put it in there. We also have Greg Lukianoff, President and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, a.k.a. FIRE. He's co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Coddling of the American Mind. Greg, welcome to Studio 2.
Thanks. And the headquarters of FIRE is actually in Philly.
Yep.
All right, let's get all the Philadelphia connections out of the way. What's your favorite cheesesteak place? No, I'm just kidding. We want to hear
Colonials.
from you.
Okay.
I did not expect that curveball. We want to hear from you listening out there. Do you think the line for socially acceptable speech in comedy has shifted or changed? What's your take on that? Do you have a personal line, like a joke would go too far if it does X, Y, and Z? 888-477-9499 is the number. The email is studio2@whyy.org. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, drop a comment in the live chat.
Yeah, Wesley wrote on Facebook, politics destroyed comedy. Libs cry at the smell of a joke. And so I wanted to start the conversation with Kamau and Greg by asking your reaction, not to the roast itself, but to the weeks. And I'm saying on my social media feed for the past several weeks, there have been hot takes and debates from people on both sides of the aisle about what the jokes were that took place at the roast. Just your thoughts and reaction to the debate that started with the roast. Kamau, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that what you said is actually the real issue here. It's not that the roast happened or that people were offended. It's that none of us can avoid it, even if we didn't watch the roast. It's because of the way that social media works and the algorithm works. Today, my guest on Who's With Me is Kristen Kish, and it just came across her social media feed, and she's like, who is this guy telling this awful joke? So she did not opt into the roast. She did not try to watch the roast. We think we used to live in a monoculture, but I think we probably live in more of one now, because you can be like, I'm not going to watch that thing, but your social media feed will demand that you take that thing in. So I think that's the bigger issue here. The roasts have been happening for years. They used to happen behind closed doors. They used to happen on television with like the Rat Pack era, and people who didn't want to watch them just didn't watch them. But now social media, the fact that media is consolidating, we're going to make sure you see this Tony Hinchcliffe joke whether you want to or not. That's the issue.
Yeah. Greg, your thoughts on this, your reaction to the debate that sort of is the result of that roast. And, a lot of people said they were offended. A lot of people loved it. Your thoughts?
I mean, people have every right to be offended. I'm a First Amendment lawyer, so I just don't want people to go to jail for what they say. But the funny thing about this is I also I do a lot about comedy. We defend a lot of comedians, like in my line of work. We did a documentary about threats to comedy and free speech. And this caused me to I don't really like roasts very much myself. They're a little too mean-spirited, but this caused me to watch the entire 3-hour roast in context, because I don't like commenting on things where I don't actually have the context for it. And as I was watching it, and by the way, most of it was really funny.
Yeah.
I started getting the impression, I'm like, are we being manipulated by Netflix right now? Like, is this basically like trying to like inject the most because roasts, the point of a roast is to offend the person you're talking to go way past the line. And they've been doing these on Comedy Central, like forever, just not that many people watch them. But Kamau's point that kind of like now they're harder to avoid is something that means that people who wouldn't never watch a roast are hearing the jokes, but they're usually hearing them outside of context. And this is exactly what happened to Lenny Bruce. People would take the great comedian who died of a drug overdose in the 60s, who was arrested for his jokes. They would take his jokes out of context, put them in scare quotes, and they just sounded horrible. But of course, when you heard them in context, for the most part, he had some flops. For the most part, they were brilliant.
Yeah.
But also, just to tag to what Greg has said, Lenny Bruce was only performing for the people in those nightclubs at the time. We're not talking about a global platform. And I think that's what happened. Yeah. And I think, Greg, you're right. I think Netflix has determined, even by the running time, nobody needs 3 hours of anything that's not directed by Christopher Nolan. Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So like even the running time is saying Netflix, like we're just going to overstuff this. Something's going to go viral here. Something's going to go big. And I would also say, Greg, not even pushback, but just context about the original roasts were about groups of friends making fun of each other the way that we all make fun of each other with our friends. And they used to happen behind closed doors. Last week on Who's With Me, it just sort of happened by timing. Ted Danson came on and told the story of his Whoopi Goldberg roast where he wore blackface and dropped the N-word. He thought those jokes weren't going to leave the room. But in 1993, Montel Williams like, I'm telling everybody.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then pictures. Those roasts were not. It wasn't televised.
But I will say that one of the nice things about the roast was there were a number of people who were good friends with Kevin, and those were some of the funniest people, like Naeem.
Naeem. But I would also say that
absolutely killed it.
But also, to me as a comedian, it's very noticeable who's not there. This is supposed to be a goat roast.
Yeah.
Chris Rock's not there.
Yeah.
Dave
Chappelle wasn't
not there.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy. They did another Eddie Murphy honoring, and I was like, all the comedians you thought would have been at the Kevin Hart roast were at the Eddie Murphy honoring on Netflix.
Yeah, I know. And it was funny because Jeff Ross actually came out dressed up like Eddie Murphy and made fun of Kevin Hart for his idol Eddie Murphy not being there, and then called him Eddie
so
Smurfy.
I want to sort of like get to the issue. One of the reasons why we wanted to do this conversation is because in my mind, comedy is sort of the canary in a coal mine to culture. And it sort of tells us in culture where the line is. And comedians allow us to explore some of the taboo things that are happening in culture. And Kamau, I'd love to get your thoughts on how you see this roast sort of dealing with the issue of George Floyd, taking on the issue of Charlie Kirk, who was killed in a violent way, and suicide, the things that and many times said, we don't really talk about that. We don't like to joke about that. How you see this roast sort of pushing that limit?
Well, again, like Greg was referring to the Comedy Central roasts, you had to go find those and watch those. And again, we're talking about these things came across your plate, whether you wanted to see them or not. And then I would say the other thing that I've heard Kevin Hart on the Breakfast Club talk about the roast, the other thing that I feel like he's not acknowledging is that to tell jokes about George Floyd, and a horrible joke like that, to tell a lynching joke. We also live in a time where Black people feel like America has turned on us in a way it hasn't turned on us since the 60s. And so those jokes feel especially sharp right now. If those jokes happened in a world where Black people had access to everything we needed and DEI hadn't been destroyed and we felt like we had everything we needed at school and home and access to everything, those jokes might be able to be fine. But we Black people as a people right now are being targeted by our government every day. And so then you go, I'm going to sit down and laugh. And now these jokes are also targeting your community. And it's being produced by Kevin Hart, a guy I thought he was with us.
We're asking you this hour, by the way, has the line changed for socially acceptable speech and comedy? What is your take? Our number is 888-477-9499. Our email is studio2@whyy.org. Carlos on Facebook says, you have to have shame to have a line, and yeah, it's always in flux. Garden on Facebook says, after Will Smith delivered the slap, I think the line changed. That didn't occur to me, but that's Garden's perspective. So I think, just to kind of go back to what Cherry was talking about, though, does this roast and the content of the roast say something about how speech has changed over just the last few years? Let's say like Trump term 2. Like, do you think, Greg, and I'll give you a chance to respond as well, Kamau, do you think the subject matter of the jokes told us something about our time?
I think it did, but I think it's not what people think it is. Because I remember when, watching Comedy Central, I always think of the Sarah Silverman show, for example, from like 2007, 2008. That show was offensive, but it was funny. And the whole point of it was that Sarah Silverman was playing this narcissistic character who was so self-involved and such an awful person, and it was making fun of her, but as an awful person, kind of a Cartman effect. And then I watched from about 2014 to 2023, particularly on campus, but also beyond, the sort of like range of acceptable things to say really shrink. And I wrote a book called Canceling of the American Mind, talking about what a disaster this was for professors in particular. And you're talking about hundreds of professors fired, during that period. I wish more people read the book. I think this is a little bit of a return to what might be considered kind of normal, for every other period other than this 10-year period we've been in. But what isn't normal, and it hasn't happened since the 60s, is that power is actually constantly trying to punish comedians. So like one thing that we've been fighting a lot is the abuse of the FCC to go after Jimmy Kimmel, to go after Colbert, and just the way Trump said he was going to do that. So you always have to police, you always have to protect comedians because you're right, they are the canaries in the coal mine. And if the comedians have to be scared, everybody else will be soon.
Kamau, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. So Greg's saying in some ways this is a return to normal. It's a return to comedic traditions. You came up through stand-up early 2000s, right? So you've got a pretty broad view here, and you know history as well. Do you think we are getting back to a sort of a libertarian interpretation of comedy where anything goes? Do you think it's something different? Does this say something about Trumpism? What are your thoughts?
I think there's never been a time where comedians have not been able to go on stage and say offensive jokes in this country. Now, who's in the audience? Who gets to hear them? How far the jokes go? But and you say I came up in the early 2000s. I came up in a time called the 90s, sir. So I've been around since almost the Jurassic era. So throughout my career, there have been times when offensive comedy has been more popular and less popular. Yep. But even Sarah Silverman was a time when offensive comedy got popular. Amy Schumer was an offensive comedian, also the voice of all women. So we are always looking for, Dane Cook was even offensive. So we're always sort of, Chappelle is offensive. Like, there's not a time where people don't want, Richard Pryor was offensive, Lenny Bruce was offensive. Often the most famous comedians are the most dangerous ones. Red Fox, people listen to his records at parties. So there's not a time when offensive comedy isn't popular. It's just, what is the comedy doing is really, and who's the comedy aimed at? And I would say specifically with the Kevin Hart roast, which is different than Tom Brady roast, is that when you say we're going to have a black person as the center of the roast, a lot of comics go, cool, I can get all my racist jokes off, in a way that they're not doing with the roast of Tom Brady. And if next year Netflix wants to do the roast of Tina Fey, a bunch of comics are going to go, cool, I can get all my sexist jokes off. That's the nature of the roast when you're not hiring friends of the person.
Yeah. I want to bring in a caller. First of all, our question of the day is, has the line changed for socially acceptable speech and comedy? And what is your take? In your mind, what is your line when it comes to jokes? What's offensive versus what's not? The number to call is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And for our watchers on YouTube and Facebook, you can put your comments in the chat. Maggie from Morristown, New Jersey is on the line. Maggie, you're on Studio 2. What's your question or comment?
Hi, how are you? First, I want to say, Kamau, I'm such a big fan of your work. I think you do fantastic documentaries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say that comedians like Josh Johnson, I think, are so brilliant because they don't really offend. They don't use racism or sexism or anything like that. And they're very much more imaginative and creative. So I think it's a cheap laugh when you use racist remarks or offensive jokes, It's easy to make people laugh when you're making fun of someone. But someone like Josh Johnson is so much more imaginative, I feel, and so much more funny because he creates jokes that unite us all rather than divide us and remind us that we aren't all, on pretty much the same boat.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's Maggie from Morristown, New Jersey. Kamau, I wanted to follow up with you about that comment you made about, when a black person is the center of the roast, which is very rare at a roast at this scale. There's only been a couple, really. And the race issue and who's in the audience, because I looked at the audience of who attended this roast, and you saw a very diverse audience, a lot of the who's who of Black LA and Hollywood in the audience witnessing this. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on just sort of like, an expansion of what you were talking about, the fact that race becomes a centerpiece of the comedy when the person just happens to be black versus if the person is not black or is Asian or fill in the blank.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the roast do is like, as Greg was saying, is like they are going to make fun of you. So what is the thing that you're going to make fun of if you don't know the person? The most obvious elements of their identity. And if you go back to those Dean Martin roasts in the 60s and 70s and 80s that were on TV, and Sammy Davis Jr., they're going to make fun of a joke of watch your wallet, Sammy Davis Jr. is here. If Wilt Chamberlain's there, they're going to say watch your wife, Wilt Chamberlain's here. They're going to make fun of the things, the most obvious things about that person. And when you do that, you're often going to lead into stereotypes, especially when these people aren't your friends. And I think that's the thing is like Naeem's roast was good because he knows Kevin, and he's come up with Kevin. And and even Regina King, I felt like was like, I'm here for you.
That was a good bet.
She didn't laugh at anybody's anything and look like you better not put my name in your mouth, and they didn't, because she's like, I'm here for my friend Kevin. And you can really feel the difference. But I think that when you put somebody like Tony Hinchcliffe on, he's just Googling your scandals and thinking about the most obvious things about your identity, and is going to tear those things apart. And there's no feeling of like, I actually like and respect you. It's more of a hired gun than an actual roast.
But is there something clarifying about the existence anyway, of Tony Hinchcliffe? Like the idea that something like that could be popular, does it pull back a layer on who Americans are or what America is, even if you don't like it?
Kid Rock had a hit song. That's my answer to that question.
Like,
things are popular. Things are popular. It doesn't make them good, or things are popular sometimes. I don't think that I don't think it means anything other than like, and then this person has figured out a way to be popular. Sometimes that person is a good thing. Sometimes that person does things that are bad. But it doesn't. All it means right now is that Tony is Tony's breakout moment was what? Performing at Trump's Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden.
Right.
So that tells us something about where the culture is at, that he's popular, but it doesn't mean there's.
But that's my question. I didn't say it was value, but that's my question. Okay. Like, is it clarifying? So like, there's people that like Tony Hinchcliffe out there who, whatever, go to his shows, in part, you would imagine, because they like jokes like this. And does that force us to confront something about what America is or who Americans are, at least some group of Americans?
Well, that's my theory on freedom of speech. My theory on freedom of speech, my idiosyncratic one, is about epistemology. That essentially it's always valuable to know what people really think, and you're not safer for knowing less about what people really think. And particularly if you try to bottle it up, it tends to explode. And I think that you do tend to have that issue. I instantly disliked Tony because I thought the jokes he made about Puerto Rico, for example, weren't jokes. They were just like, they weren't even funny. So I went into it, trying to give him a fair shot. And he did better than I expected him to. But I do think that since I believe in not just freedom of speech from the First Amendment standpoint, I believe in a free speech culture. One thing that we've gotten worse about doing is respecting some of the elements of a free speech culture. And part of that are things like little old sayings that we used to say, which is our to each their own, everyone's entitled to their opinion, not my cup of tea. And the thing that I always see, because this is my lens that I can't turn off, is class. I see a lot of the way that like the poor people, I grew up with, and like the kids I used to work with in DC mess with each other. And I saw a lot of that kind of dynamic in that room. And there's a certain amount of like, that's nobody's business. And, let
me push back on you, Greg, then, because I think what I heard Kamau saying is that there's added danger to these types of jokes now, the sort of outrage baiting jokes, because of the way social media works. And it's almost like an accelerant to a flame. And so should we necessarily, and it's not, no one here is, I don't think, proposing putting people in jail for these jokes, but should we as Netflix or whoever the powers that be not encourage them as much, because we know how these jokes tend to proliferate in our media culture today? Or should we
I just want to jump in real quick and add, let's also remember that Netflix did cut out several jokes from the re-airing of the roast. Some that were about Melania Trump, some that were about Kevin Hart's affair.
They did?
Yeah, there's 18 jokes that they cut out from the re-air.
I did not know.
So
that sucks.
So clearly Netflix and or the producers of the show, i.e. Kevin Hart, had lines they didn't want to be crossed, but lynching and George Floyd being condemned to hell were not those lines. So I think when we talk about freedom of speech, that's why I want to lock it in. Freedom of speech is about the government stopping you from talking.
I disagree on that, actually, because like if you only limit it to the idea that the government can't stop you, you end up but your culture is incredibly oppressive. You know, like during the Victorian era, like when John Stuart Mill was writing, he wasn't writing about government repression. He was talking about what he considered to be a repressive society in which the upper classes get to tell everybody else that they have to think this way, and that's also dangerous to freedom of speech.
I think the issue, the issue is for me is that what we're doing right now is freedom of speech. What we're doing right now, Tony Hinchcliffe telling that joke and me not liking that joke is freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
But what I'm told when I criticize Tony Hinchcliffe's joke is that I'm trying to cancel him.
Yeah.
No.
And I want to get to this.
Anybody who says that, I've heard this allegation. And canceling means you're going to try to get, canceling is trying to ruin someone's career, trying to get them fired, actually taking active steps towards that. Criticism is not canceling. And there's this kind of straw man argument that that's what people are actually saying is like criticism is canceling. Nobody's saying that.
I mean,
I want to read a comment here because D.A. Smith says, I think it crosses the line when they punch down instead of punching up. And so I wanted to sort of address an issue, and we're going to extend it out a little bit for the break. A big thing that you kept hearing the different comedians say is that they wanted us to be as racist as possible, that they wanted us to, I had to say this for the check. And so I want to sort of on the other end.
I think Shane Gillis specifically said that.
Oh, yeah, I said it several times.
And other people said that, well, they wrote this in the script. I had to say it for the check. And there were multiple comedians who said that. And so on one end, Kamau, you talk about Netflix sort of editing itself and editing out 18 jokes. But on the other end, they're pushing these comedians to say racist, offensive, misogynistic things. And so I'd love to get your takes before we go to the break on that pushing them to be as edgy as possible and to be as mean and racist as possible. Come out.
Again, it's about Netflix wants virality more than they care about our respect. Netflix wants our attention more than they care about our respect. You know, we all remember when Netflix was premium, and Netflix is not premium like it used to be premium anymore. And that's why, again, it was almost 3 hours long. That means they're trying to pan for as much virality as possible without concern about, like, is this a good show?
Yeah.
That's not what it is.
And Greg, quickly, do you think it's a good thing that Netflix, a global conglomerate like this, is pushing people to be more offensive?
To try to be edgy at a roast, that's like the least surprising thing I've ever heard. And I want to point out, by the way, just so people who didn't put themselves through watching 3 hours of that thing should know, it was overwhelmingly short jokes and jokes about Kevin Hart's terrible movies.
Yeah.
And his inability to say no to money.
Him being short. There was probably 40% of the jokes were about his height. Yeah.
So we're going to come back on the other side of this break and talk more. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of like the vehicles for delivering these types of jokes. So we're talking about roasts right now, but you brought up earlier, Greg, Sarah Silverman playing a character. Maybe think of Colbert playing a character at one point in his career and how that actually changes the way people perceive potentially offensive jokes. So we'll talk about that on the other side of this break. We're asking you this hour, has the line changed for socially acceptable speech and comedy? We'd love to hear your opinion. 888-477-9499. Email studio2@whyy.org. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, comment in the live chat. We'll be right back on Studio 2 from WHYY. And welcome back, friends, to Studio 2 on WHYY. I'm Avi Wolfman-Arndt.
And I'm Cherry Gregg. Before we jump back into our conversation about shifting lines in comedy and culture, it is time to reveal today's Giveaway Wednesday event.
Sonny came home to her favorite room. Sonny sat down in the kitchen.
Way over yonder in the monarchy. There ain't nobody that can sing like me.
Oh, wow. That was Sean Colvin and then Billy Bragg, both part of the River Roads Music Festival, happening Saturday, June 27th in King of Prussia. We have 2 pairs of tickets for that day-long festival. Also includes Dar Williams. Well, I love Dar Williams. We need to get tickets to this, as well as 10,000 Maniacs.
Yeah, each pair of passes is a $162 value. Pretty cool, right? And the first 2 people who email studio2@whyy.org and ask for the tickets will get them. So email now.
Yeah, you got to do it now. Let's get back to our conversation about comedy and if we've grown more tolerant to jokes that push the boundary on what's offensive and what that might tell us about the cultural moment we're in. We're joined by Kamau Bell, stand-up comedian and creative force behind We Need to Talk About Cosby and United Shades of America. He's also the host of a new video podcast on the latest in politics and culture called Who's With Me? We also have Greg Lukianoff, president and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. Has the line changed for socially acceptable speech and comedy? What is your take? And where is your line when it comes to jokes, right? The number to call is 888-477-9499. The email is studio2@whyy.org. And for our YouTube and Facebook viewers and listeners, you can put the comments in the live chat.
2 interesting YouTube comments. One from Better Integra saying, I think what people are struggling with is the irrelevance of their outrage. It is attention-seeking fake outrage. Nobody cares what you're complaining about anymore.
Interesting.
Akram on YouTube says, I don't know how I feel about where the line should be, but I do know that outrage emboldens gross jokes and edgy comedians. I think ignoring them and just saying you're not funny is better. And that brings me to a question I have for you, Kamau, which is, if Netflix is very cynically exploiting our media culture and pushing these clipped offensive jokes, what should be our response if we decide we don't want this, we want better content?
I mean, this is also about the current era of America, which, remember when letters to the editor were written by people who were like not the most regular, normal people? Now that's the comment section.
Yes.
So
yes.
Somebody saying you all shouldn't be outraged, you're being outraged by the wrong thing, is also being outraged by the person being outraged. So it's like, it's just, it's a snake eating its own tail. And I think that, like, I want to be clear about this. What we are doing is talking. That's a part of being a human. He said something, we're saying something, nobody's hair is on fire, nobody's panties are on fire, we're having a conversation. If you don't want to have that conversation, you can go over there. But this is what I was talking about, Greg. People act like me talking about what happened and going, here's my thoughts on it, is somehow like you're either canceling him or you're weak.
Yeah, or you're being a scold.
Or you're being a scold. It's like, and also, I want to say something earlier. We talked about, like, is this clarifying or revealing to hear these jokes, these racist jokes? I'm a black kid who went to a private school. I didn't need to hear from Tony Hinchcliffe that white people can be racist sometimes to know that that happens. And so to me, the only people who go, whoa, I didn't know it was this way, are people who've never confronted America's history and present day tradition of racism.
So, Greg, what do you think then? Obviously, you're going to argue, I assume, like our response should not be to restrict speech or to try to, I guess, cancel people, whatever that particularly means. But then if we decide we would prefer different types of content, we don't want to encourage this behavior, what is the systematic response to that?
Well, my systematic and my deep response, is my mom is British, is anytime I hear about what we should do when we talk about the country like it's a single person with an opinion and things that will offend it or not, is just remembering we're definitely not that. And that's one of, I think, our great strengths, is we've always been a country where people from Richmond didn't like anyone from Boston, didn't know anybody from California, was nothing like anyone from Texas. So it's one of these things where, like, we have to accept to some degree that we do have, very different people with very different tastes. And when people feel like they're being looked down upon, there's a very typical dimension. And there is one important thing to say. We're never going to win the battle against offense because it's a moving target. And as soon as you actually establish this is the line, you're like, you're daring people to cross it, and you bet you bet they will, because there's good incentives for that. But we also have to remember, people have very different norms about what they find offensive and what they don't, and that's actually a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, Snow Michelle says on Facebook, the climate we're in is not okay for the content presented at that event. Aaliyah says it was unacceptable. It will never be okay for anybody, specifically white people, to make the jokes that they made, and she specifically references the lynching joke about a bonsai tree for Kevin Hart. And she says any joke about George Floyd is and will always be unacceptable and cancel worthy. And so I wanted to sort of talk about the difference between just a few years ago when people were being, I mean, I guess with the Charlie Kirk situation, people were being canceled then as well. But
Absolutely.
just a few years ago, we went through this whole racial reckoning, right? And if you said something that was racially offensive, people were canceled. And there became a moment where folks wondered if we had become socially fragile. Like, you say one bad word, you say something people don't like, you lost your job. People are, boycotting you. You're no longer getting invited. You losing jobs. And so have we sort of, and you made the argument, Greg, that we're sort of returning to normal. I just wonder, did we just have a culturally fragile moment come out? And are we just becoming, our skin getting thicker again just because we're just in this new era? Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that? I think people really, when I hear this stuff about how the return to normal, white women have only had the right to vote for like 100 or so years. Black people didn't get the right to vote until after that, because we had to deal with poll taxes and poll tests and all these things. The idea that there was this time where America was like, is a mystery time that does not exist. It sort of gets, this is the gateway drug to make America great again. So to me, the idea that America at a time where we were like, finally the pillaging must stop. We have to give respect to everyone equally. And then the response to that by the powers that be was to target trans kids playing sports. So to me, I think there's a mystery time in the past, a magical mystery fictional time when things were good, that we then go, there was that one time where people started to get canceled, Me Too, cancel culture, and now we're returning back to the good old days. The good old days, I think every black person I know wants to be like, when were those good old days again? My mom's 89 years old. She has not seen a good old day in her whole life.
And Greg, you have a response to that?
And with all due respect, because, I'm going to follow some a little harsh about that. That's another straw man argument that I'm tired of, is that people who are arguing about freedom of speech are saying there was some perfect golden age when everybody got along. No serious person is saying that. What I am saying is that for about 10 years, and there's an attempt to kind of erase this even happening, there was a period where, journalists were losing their jobs just for retweeting pretty tame jokes. Like, we went to a higher, and this wasn't fragility. This was retributiveness. People were having fun going after people for things that they're like, oh, that could be transgressive. That might be transgressive if I read it this way. And it really went, and people are still angry about that. So, I mean, there is always this, it's kind of like there's this idea that someone is eventually going to win the culture war. Nobody's ever going to. It's going to be a back and forth of people getting mad about different things until, the robots kill us all.
And let's also remember that, now journalists are getting fired for just doing their jobs.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
and doing the jobs they were hired to do. Scott Pelley at CBS News was fired for being a journalist.
Is there, though, Greg, any upside to sort of normalizing or making space for extremely offensive speech? I mean, what is the upside for saying? I mean, besides the fact that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, outside of the First Amendment, I'm not saying people should be arrested or fired, but is there an upside to just, sort of pushing the boundaries for the societal tolerance of extremely offensive speech?
I think a society with perfect candor among people, where people actually said what they thought, is something that initially sounds horrifying, but actually would be a healthier society in a lot of ways. And I think that ultimately, when you have a situation where you're learning what people think, it's important to hear the bad stuff. Lenny Bruce himself would talk about this. It's kind of like when you have syphilis, it's good to know that someone has it. And I always make the joke about censorship is like taking Xanax for syphilis. That essentially you feel better, you feel more relaxed, but you're still dying.
Yeah.
Lobster on YouTube says comedians are naturally anti-authoritarian. As a comedian, Kamau, I'm curious how you take that statement, but also wanted to just get your sense as a practitioner of this art. The temptations to lean into an offensive bit or an edgy bit, and where you personally feel comfortable going, how far you feel comfortable going.
So first of all, I think comedians are naturally anti-something. I wouldn't say it's always anti-authoritarian, because the Rogan sphere is very pro of the authoritarian who's running this country. Joe Rogan is very pro the authoritarian in charge. So I think, but they are definitely anti. You have to be anti something to find a joke. You have to be against something. I wouldn't say that Seinfeld's one of the biggest comedians in this country. I don't think his act is anti-authoritarian in any way, or I think it's anti-socks in the dryer being lost. So which is fine. Fine. But so I would say that like every comedian has their lines that they won't cross, even the ones who say I cross all the lines. You can always find something where it's like, oh, but you never honest about who you are and yourself. Yeah. So I think that like every comedian has those lines. I certainly have lots of my act that I want people to go, hey, but the difference is I will defend that line as something that I wanted to cross. But there is a part about being a comedian where you have to make mistakes in your act to figure out where you want the joke to end up at. And I think that is something that gets lost sometimes. It's why many comedians lock up people's phones when they're on tour, because they're like, I'm working towards the special. Yeah. In this part, I'm actually figuring it out. And I don't need you all getting mad about something I didn't figure out. That I think is true.
Let me ask you a question.
You can do it in public.
Sorry to cut you off, Kamau, but I'm curious, but just commercially, what type of comedy do you see being rewarded today? What do the studios, what do the content makers want to back today?
I think the studios, these are different questions. So first of all, we brought up Josh Johnson earlier, or the caller did. Josh Johnson is one of the hottest comedians in the country and got a HBO comedy special based off the back of like he decided 3 years ago, I'm going to post a stand-up comedy clip every day. Yeah. He's a correspondent on The Daily Show. He's a sometimes host of The Daily Show. He's one of the hosts. And Josh Johnson puts like these long sets up every week on YouTube where he's doing topical comedy. So he knows he's not going to be able to do it in 2 weeks. It's topical comedy. And then what happened is that HBO was like, oh, he did that. They didn't put him on because they thought that was interesting. They put him on because it was popular, because he got millions of followers on YouTube doing that. At the same time, Matt Rife got popular from posting crowd work clips. And he put thousands of crowd work clips there. And again, Netflix didn't say, let's do specials with you because that's good. They did it because the comedian Matt Rife proved it was popular. So the industry is always going to go for what is popular. Tony Hinchcliffe is on Netflix because Kill Tony is one of the biggest video podcasts in the world. Netflix says we want that because it's popular, not because it fits what we think is good. And so I think we live in a time where the media consolidation means they're more interested in popular. We as the artists have to do the work to get popular. They're beyond like going, this diamond in the rough, let's clean him up and figure it out. We're not at the day of Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis Presley. Elvis would need millions of TikTok followers before Tom Parker signed him up these days.
Yeah, I got to read this comment. Matthew says, listening to today's discussion about whether comedy goes too far, I couldn't help but think about the conversation on the Maine Senate race. It seems we're often quick to condemn offensive words, but willing to overlook questionable actions when the political outcome benefits our side. Whether it's comedy or candidates, shouldn't the standard be the same? The two shows left me wondering, are we judging principles consistently or just protecting our preferred teams? So, yeah.
I mean, that's about Maine, though, isn't it? Isn't Maine kind of a weird state?
It is.
But just to be clear, we are protecting our preferred teams. Yeah. And one of the things that has been, really frustrating is watching kind of a situation where I can't find reliable allies for free speech either on the right or the left these days. Yeah. It's been actually, incredibly frustrating. And watching people be total hypocrites is something that I'm very used to, but it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, we have to leave the conversation there, but I enjoyed it thoroughly. And let me thank our guest. Greg Lukianoff is president and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, also co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Coddling of the American Mind. Greg, thanks for being here on Studio 2.
Thanks so much for having me. Love Philly.
And let me also thank W. Kamau Bell, stand-up comedian and creative force behind We Need to Talk About Cosby and United Shades of America. He's also the host of a new video podcast on the latest in politics and culture called Who's With Me? Kamau, thank you so much for your time today on Studio 2.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who wrote in and called in on today's show. And of course, I got to thank our producers, Debbie Builder, Hazel Mae Bryan, and Paige Murray Bessler. Mike Schiffler is our visual producer. Al Banks and Tina Calicay engineered today's show. Our executive producer is Kevin McCory from Studio 2 here at WHYY in Philadelphia. I'm Cherry Gregg.
I'm Avi Wolfman Aaron. I'm going to do my Gilbert Gottfried now.
Oh, goodness.
Never mind. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Coming up tomorrow, it's the most watched sporting event on the planet. The FIFA World Cup will be broadcasting live on site at Lemon Hill in Fairmount Park as the first day of FIFA Fan Fest kicks off.
Yeah, we'll be talking about delicious food to make during your watch parties, all the work it took to get the World Cup here, a special round of trivia. So much happening tomorrow.
We'll be on the radio, but go to WHYY's YouTube channel for the video live stream. FIFA Studio 2 live tomorrow. Go!
The Barn supports WHYY and presents a special screening of films by Freedom Dreams artist Arthur Jafa, curated by Mayuri Carmel Holmes of Black Star Projects. The program features narrative, documentary, and experimental works, followed by a conversation with filmmaker Elisa Blount Moorhead. June 13th from 1 to 4 p.m. Tickets include access to the Barnes collection and the Freedom Dreams exhibition. BarnesFoundation.org. The Barnes. See art differently.
This is WHYY FM Philadelphia, WNJM Manahawkin, WNJN FM Atlantic City,